Welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And as you can see, we're in Parshat Pinchas right there. And we're talking about the statutory public offerings, the offerings that were brought on behalf of the entire Jewish people, that we're starting off, of course, with the daily Olah, and then we discussed Shabbat, and now we're in the midst of discussing the specific offerings that were brought on Rosh Chodesh. So here we go. So we're in the midst of these. We're talking about the accompanying libations. I know we're calling them libations, which would be drink offerings, but these actually were simply accompanying offerings that went along with the animals. So there was essentially three different items that were involved in the accompaniments. A meal, that's fine flour, and then oil, olive oil, and then also wine. So these were all part of what was brought onto the altar as part of the sacrifice. So here we are. The isaron, and a 1/10, and here 1/10 of an ephah, right, or 1/10 of an omer. Or is it, I believe, actually, excuse me, it could be actually an omer, right? An isarom is an omer, and it's 1/10 of an ephah. And that is solet is fine flour, mincha as a meal offering, blula vashemen mixed with oil, la keves ha'echad for the one lamb. Olah reach nichoach ishel Adonai, an olah offering, a whole offering, as of pleasing savor, pleasing that the smell of it, right? The odor should be pleasing. Ishel Adonai, a fire offering for the Lord, for the Lord. So let's take a look. Okay, we're going to keep going. V'niskehem, again, this specifically, the nesech we're talking now here about the wine. So really, this is the libations, right? The actual wine, chatzi hahin, that is 1/2 of a hin, par should be for the bull, right? They had to bring bulls. We mentioned 2 bulls. Here's the hin, and there are, excuse me one second, and we are hin is there's some various looks like there's some various opinions as to exactly the volume of a hin. One was 3.6 to 3.8 liters, which would be 1 gallon. Apparently there's another opinion that holds it as a higher number, right? 1.5 gallons. That's a hin, right? So a half a hin yelapar should be accompanying the bull, ushlishit, and 1/3 of a hin, hahin la'ayel for a ram, or vi'it hahin lakeves, yayin, and 1/4 of a hin for the lamb of wine. Zot olat chodesh bechodsho lechodshei hashana. This is the olah of the month, the monthly olah in its month, lechodshei hashana, according to the months of the year, for the months of the year. Rashi?
Rabbi,
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't remember. Did we say the blessing?
Yes. I said it at the very beginning.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I do remember now, but we can go back and check the recording and see. But I do believe I said it at the very
Okay, no, I
beginning.
wasn't here at the very
No
beginning.
problem. Okay. Well, no. You were here, but for that, but unless you left. Okay. But thank you. I still appreciate being reminded. Zot Olat Chodesh Bechodsho. This is the Olah for each month in its month. She'im avar yomo. We've had this also with where we had Shabbat b'Shabbato, right? So this is Chodesh b'Chodsho. She'im avar yomo. That is, if he forgot or if he neglected, or for whatever reasons he did not bring these particular specific offerings on that Rosh Chodesh, Batel Korbano, the offering is no longer valid. V'shuv ein lo tashlumo. And again, there is no reparation. There's no way to make up for it. It has to be done at the particular time. going on. Useir izim echad lachatat, and a goat, right? Seir izim is a goat, echad one lachatat ladonai, as a sin offering for the Lord, right? So there's some ambiguity there as to why it says for the Lord. Okay. Well, Rashi's going to go into that and explore that ambiguity. Al olat hatamid, and this is in addition to the tamid offering. That's that daily offering we're talking about. Ye'aseh, it shall be done. Venisko, and it's libation and it's libation. That would be to do with the olat hatamid. Again, let's take a look at Rashi. He has quite a bit to say. Usiir izim. And this we introduced this. We did not ever have a goat offering until now. Now this is being introduced. Kol seirei hamusafim. All those goats that are accompanying the musaf, these additional offerings, but in lachaper, they come in order to atone al tumat mikdash regarding any impurity in the sanctuary, ukudoshav and its and sanctified objects. So, for example, if a person handled these things in an impure state, was impure when they did this, and this raises sort of an interesting issue that here they are performing something of great sanctity, but the trouble is there's also that level of impurity that one has to be. It is a privilege to be able to perform sanctified deeds. And in order to do that, one has to make sure that one is in a state of purity to perform these particular sacred deeds. And what this is saying is that this particular goat offering, because it's a sin offering, comes to atone if in fact we're going to see some more as Rashi explores this further as to if somebody happened to be impure at the time when and had some sort of impurity or introduced some sort of impurity into this particular ritual or went into the sanctuary in an impure state, etc. There are all kinds of ways in which impurity might be introduced. Hakol kamo shemafurash. Everything here, in other words, this whole issue here, kamo shura, as is explained the Masechet Shavuot. In other words, in the tractate Shavuot, which means oaths, right? There's this tractate on page 9 discusses this particular topic of how this might happen and how, quite possibly, how the sin offering comes to atone for that. V'nishta'er se'ir Rosh Chodesh. And what he's saying is that the goat of Rosh Chodesh is unique. It's different. Shne'emar lo, because when it comes to the se'ir of Rosh Chodesh, it's stated differently than this, because we are going to talk about se'irim in future when we discuss the musafim of the holidays, right? So it says here in this statement, it's different, it's unique. Shneimar bo lashem, because there here in this particular case it says lashem. It adds this echad lechatat lashem. So this term lashem isn't stated elsewhere when we're going to mention this particular seir, right? Talmudo lelamadcha. So the purpose of this scriptural passage is to teach you shemechaper, that in fact it is atoning al she'ein ba yedi'ah. In other words, it's in a case where a person wasn't aware of it, where there's unawareness that one is introducing this impurity into the sin, into the sanctuary, right? So lo batchila, not beforehand, but lo basof, and not as a recollection. In other words, that one looks back and says, oops, an oops situation. She'ein makir b'chet. In other words, this person wasn't able to recognize that they had sinned. Ela HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Only the Holy One, blessed be He, who knows this. In other words, the Lashem here means, in other words, for any impurity that was introduced into the sanctuary that human beings were unaware of, but God was aware of. Bilvad, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bilvad, only the Holy One, blessed be He. Usha'ar hasi'irim, and the remaining goats that are mentioned elsewhere in as we continue these passages, lemeidim mimenu. We learn this out from this particular example, this very first example of introducing the se'ir into these offerings. We can infer all the others, even when they don't say Lashem. Right? We learn from it. Umidrasho ba'agado, and this is something, in other words, there's also a midrashic interpretation in the Agadic material that is in Chulin on Tractate Chulin, page 60. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is a midrash. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, Heviu kapara alai, bring an atonement for me. In other words, al shema'atati et hayarech, because I diminished the moon, because I made the moon less. Okay, so that's why it's being brought on a Rosh Chodesh, because that's when we have the new moon, and that, of course, is when the moon cannot be visible for a moment. And this all goes back to Genesis, where we have this midrash about the moon and the moon's basically the moon and the sun, and the moon saying, how can there be two rulers? And God says to the moon, you're absolutely right. So I'm going to make the sun greater than you are. And I'm going to have to make you less so that there's only one quote, quote, ruler, metaphorically. But on the other hand, God created the stars as jewelry for the moon by way of paying the moon back. Obviously, this is all highly suggestive and metaphoric, but this is going back to this particular issue. And the moon itself, by the way, is symbolic of the fate of the Jewish people, that this waxing and waning has to do with the history. As you go back and look at the history of the Jewish people and see that there were times when they were actually, when they were at a great, they had great moments, and also moments in which, of course, they were almost wiped out. But of course, the fact that the moon returns after it is passes its new moon stage is again symbolic of the fact that somehow the Jewish people have come back, etc. So there's all this particular symbolism here. I think that is it on the Rashi's foot. No, here we go. Al olata tamid ye'aseh. I think that's actually another verse. Let me double check and see. Uh, okay.
Rabbi,
Uh,
Rabbi,
yes, yes.
there, I, is it, according to what I understand, there's a time to congregate for Jews to congregate. Is that on the full moon or the new moon?
So the new moon is the Rosh Chodesh. It's a minor festival, but basically, when you look at Pesach and Sukkot, they both occur at the full moon. They occur on the 15th of the month, which would be the full moon.
Because
So
my understanding is that at the full moon means it's more dangerous outside. So are Jews congregating at that time, or are they
I'm
congregating?
So you're introducing a lot of things that I'm not aware of, Michael. Honestly, it's not necessary. Okay, if you're talking about when Jews are supposed to get together outside, that's at the new moon. There is a ceremony to bless the new moon, the fact that it appears once again. So I think it's more, I don't think it has anything to do with danger or anything like that. It would seem to me that it makes more sense to see it as a ceremony of gratitude that the moon has returned, because it happens at the sighting of the new moon.
They're more likely to congregate inside on a full moon for safety, and
Yeah,
outside for
yeah. I mean, but that I think it also has. I don't know that safety is the great concern here. Whether or not it has more to do with being in a building in terms of, other kinds of issues. It may have to do with safety, but that's not, it's nothing that I sort of have found in biblical sources that I'm aware of, or even rabbinic sources to the extent that I've studied them. Are there issues of safety? Yes. The issues of safety, for example, when it comes to lighting the Hanukkah menorah, because they lived in a Persian culture where they practiced Zoroastrianism. And so there were days when the Persians at that time were worshiping fire or something like that. And for them to see fire lit in Jewish homes, I guess they saw as as being very disrespectful. Because I guess I don't know much about Zoroastrianism, but I believe it's a dualism that has to do with a god of light and a god of darkness. So, I think there it's mentioned in Tractate Shabbat, which discusses Hanukkah, about what do you do if you're living in that kind of society where, since you're supposed to put the Hanukkah menorah in a window opposite the public domain, where people are going through, where the public can see it. So now we have an issue of danger, and what do you do in that particular case? But yeah, I
Wait,
mean.
scientifically, also the full moon is considered a more dangerous time.
I'm okay. Again, I'm not certain. Are you talking about in terms of the tides?
No, no, lunacy. It affects people's
Oh,
psychology.
oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
What
Again,
were they supposed to do?
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. So what are they supposed to do when it's dangerous to put the menorah in the window?
You're allowed to put it inside your home. We weren't given the mitzvahs to put ourselves into danger. So, I mean, there's a general principle that it says, "V'chayitim bahem," you shall live by them, and it's understood by that as meaning the mitzvahs are there to live by and not to die by. So the short answer is that you'd put it someplace in the house in that particular circumstance. Remember, you've heard me talk about circumstances alter cases. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as lunacy and that kind of thing, I'm not aware of, I'm not aware of anything, at least from the little bit that I know of discussions of this from a Jewish perspective. To say that in general, we know we're affected by color, we're affected by weather, we're affected emotionally by a whole bunch of different kinds of things. And so as far as the moon coming out, you know, that sort of thing and how we might be affected by it. I recognize as to what degree it impacts halacha. I'm not so sure. It's not an area that I've studied.
We said there is congregation on the new moon, right?
It's not a congregation. It's actually done more a group of friends get together and it's not sort of necessarily seen as a synagogue kind of thing, but rather it's a matter of it's a custom, I would say. And there's a custom of gathering together with friends at the moon. It's basically you have the first week of the month in which to do it, you know.
That's
So
the answer I was looking
yeah.
for. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but there is definitely a ceremony called Birkat HaChodesh, I think is what it's called, and that you can find it in traditional prayer books where the prayers are there. And as I said, I think it's primarily out of a sense of gratitude that the moon has reappeared. And I think it is connected again to the fate of the Jewish people. That I do know from what I've studied.
So the new moon is not most important? I thought the new moon was most important.
Well,
Oh,
you say most important in what regard?
the absence of light on the moon. So it's not that. It's like if it has 1% light, if it is a new moon
Yes.
with light, what is it called? Waning, right?
First, waning means it's getting smaller. Waxing means it's starting to get larger. So we'd be looking at a waxing moon. Okay, we are.
Start of the waxing phase. The
Yeah,
start of waxing.
that is correct. It's the beginning of a new phase.
Okay.
All right. So going on. So it said alolata tamid yaseh score, right? So here we go in the Rashi. Alolata tamid yaseh. It shall be performed in addition to the tamid offering. Kol hakorban hazeh, meaning this is this entire offering, right? This entire sacrifice. Venisko and its libations, Ein venisko al musav al sa'ir, nisko its libations. So what's the its here? Is it referring, because we've just been talking about the sa'ir, the goat, right? The kid. So the question, Rashi says, it is not, the libation has nothing to do with the offering of the goat, right? It's referring, I believe it's talking about the Tamid offering. That because the Tamid offering, which is a lamb, would have libations, and Rashi points out that she'ein nesachim lachatat, that since this the offering of the goat is a sin offering does not have libations. Libations again are associated with thanksgiving, etc. So onwards. So now we've just taken care of the Rosh Chodesh, and now we're going to start the festivals, the round of festivals, and the specific musafim, the specific additional offerings that were associated with each festival. Uva Chodesh Harishon, and in the first month, Ba'arba'asar Yom LaChodesh, on the 14th day of the month, Pesach Lashem, a Pesach offering to God. Uvachamisha asa yom lachodesh hazeh, and on the 15th day of this month, Chag, a festival. The word Chag is related to a word that means to circle, and I assume that it could mean a circle in terms of how they performed the offerings and whether or not they had some kind of circling, or whether it has to do, I wonder, whether we're talking about the fact that we're talking about the circle of the year. In other words, that there's on an annual basis. I'm not certain. It's just something that occurs to me as we're studying this now. Shiv'at Yamim, 7 days, matzot ye'achel, matzot shall be eaten. So again, this sounds as if we're supposed to eat matzahs all 7 days. And remember, this is biblical, according to the biblical commandment, that we should be eating matzahs for 7 days. But in another place, it talks about 6 days. And if it's 7 days, how come it says 6 days? And the understanding is that if it's 6 days, that matzahs need to be eaten, and it's saying the seventh day obviously doesn't. What it means that we only have to eat. It's only a mitzvah to eat matzahs on the first day of Pesach. If you don't want to eat matzah for the remaining 6 days of Pesach, you don't need to eat matzah. It doesn't mean you're allowed to eat bread. It just simply means that if you're trying to cut down the carbs and you don't want to eat matzah for the rest of Pesach, you don't have to. But at the Seder, essentially, it is a mitzvah to eat matzah. It says you shall eat them on unleavened bread, that the Pesach on unleavened bread. So it's a positive mitzvah. And that's why we say a bracha, a blessing, al achilat matzah, regarding the consumption of matzah at the Pesach when we eat the matzah at the Seder. But if you don't want to eat matzah anymore, you don't. As long as you're still observing the fact that you're not allowed to eat any kind of leavened bread. So, in another place, it does say 6 days. So here goes. Let's take a look as we go on, right? Bayom Harishon Mikra Kodesh, on the first day of these 7 days, it shall be a sacred convocation. In other words, a gathering of a sacred gathering, Kol Melechet Avodah, any kind of, this is translated as servile work. Rashi's going to discuss what we mean by Melechet Avodah. He's going to go into what exactly we're talking about. Lo ta'asu, you shall not perform. So we see that it is similar to Shabbat in the sense that you cannot do labor. You cannot labor on Shabbat. That's essentially what we're talking about. So here we go. Kol, any kind of labor, right? Afilu melacha hatzricha lacham, even labor that you require, that you need to do. Rashi gives an example, kagon davar ha'aved, right? For example, something which might cause you financial loss. You're still not allowed to do it on the first day of Pesach, or first day of this festival, right? Even if it might cause you financial loss, hamuteret b'cholo shemoed, which would be permitted. Excuse me, remember this is a 7-day festival, so the remaining 6 days, at least, or the intermediate days, so it's actually 5 days because you're going to see that the seventh day is also a festival. Asura b'Yom Tov. This is forbidden on a Yom Tov. So you're not supposed to go in and make money on the first of this day, of this festival. This is the idea of kol melechet avodah. So biblically, one is forbidden to perform any kinds of labor on Yom Tov. Now, how about cooking? That is stated, I believe, in Leviticus, where we also discuss the festivals. There it mentions that cooking for the festival, that is for your festival meal, is permissible on Yom Tov. And in that sense, it is distinguished from Shabbat, because on Shabbat, you're not allowed to do cooking for the day either. So let's keep going. I think here we go. All right. V'hikravtem isheh, and you shall offer up a fire offering, olah lashem, as a whole offering, an olah to God. Parim, again, now we're into Bnei Vakar Shnayim. So bulls, two of the herd, two, v'ayal echad, and one ram, v'shiva kvasim b'nei shana tamimim yiyu lachem, and 7 lambs of a year, yearling lambs, pure, perfect, yiyu lachem, shall be for you, right, on your account. Let's take a look. Here we go. Parim. So here we have this symbolism. Parim, the bulls, keneged Avraham. They represent Abraham. They're a reference back. So these offerings actually have a significance of a historical reference. And there's this, how can I put it? This identification throughout our history. Even though Abraham has long since passed on, he's still very much a part of who we are as a people. So the bulls represent Abraham. Shneimar, as it states in Genesis chapter 18, Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham, and Abraham ran to the herd. And remember, that has to do with the visit of the 3 strangers that is back there. Elim, of course, rams, keneged elo shel Yitzchak. This is to symbolize, or in reference to the ram associated with Isaac. And kvasim and lambs, keneged Yaakov, right? And that represents Jacob, Shneimar, as it says in Genesis chapter 30, V'kvasim hifrid Yaakov. Jacob separated out the sheep, I guess, in this case, keves, sheep, but it's a yearling sheep, so it's still a lamb. So Rashi gives the reference from where he got this. B'yisudo shel Rabbi Moshe Hadashan ra'iti zot. This is a reference that he mentions quite often, and this is, I guess, a work that's called the Yisudo shel Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan. So that's where he's saying he saw this particular interpretation. It's going on. Umin chatam, and so now their meal offering, solet blula vashemen, that is fine flour mixed with oil. This is sounding familiar. Shlosha esronim lapar, 3 isaronim lapar for each bull, ushne esronim la'ayil, and 2 isaronim for a ram you shall make. Isaron, Isaron Taseh, and remember there were 7 lambs, Shiva Kvasim, so a tenth you shall do, La Keves Ha'echad, for each lamb, the Shivat HaKvasim, for the 7 lambs. And going on, we'll keep going just to finish about this first day's offering. Useir chatat echad, and one goat as a sin offering, lekaper alechem, in order to atone for you. So you can see the wording is different here, right? Milvad olat haboker, and this is apart from the morning Olah asher lo la tamid, which belongs to the tamid offering. Tasu et ele, you shall perform these. Ka'ele ta'asu, like this, these particular offerings. Ta'asu leyom shivat hayamim, you will perform each day for the 7 days. Lechem literally means bread, but it can also mean food. Isheh, a fire offering. Reach nichoach, of pleasing savor, Lashem, to the Lord. Al olat tamid, over and above the tamid offering. Ya'aseh, it shall be performed. Alvenisko and its libations. And we'll stop right here. We aren't finished with Pesach yet, because as you'll see, we're going to get to the 7th day, Uvayom Hashvi'i, and we'll continue that next time we meet. All right. Anything for the record at this point? Okay, I will stop the recording.